Hi, Sarah and Jonathan and all. Just reflecting on the cause of confidence. I just heard some audio about confidence, and if I think about my own life, I suppose that the confidence was caused through understanding the meaning of the word Abhidharma. So I remember that being given the book Abhidharma in Daily Life by Sarah. And I think immediately within about the first 3 or 4 pages, I understood that the Abhidharma was referring to what was now seeing, hearing, thinking, and also, therefore, it was provable because it could be known. We're not talking about what's on the dark side of the moon or how life began. We're talking about seeing and hearing and thinking. And so that's where my confidence sprang from. And I was just wondering, yeah, but perhaps where this maybe just elaborate a bit more about confidence and where it actually comes from, because I have seen questions on Quora and other places on the web. How does one convert to Buddhism? And I suppose my answer would be that you understand what he said. So if there's no understanding of what he said, you cannot appreciate who the Buddha was or convert to Buddhism. So I don't know, how did your confidence start? So should we go with that? So Jonathan, perhaps, how did you first become confident in Buddhism? Because there's one thing about you, Sarah, and John, and some of the others here, is that your confidence doesn't flinch because constantly you're being challenged all the time by people with different views, different beliefs, different interpretations of Buddhism, and yet you never flinch on your confidence. So I'd just be interested to know where your confidence came from.
Well, I think it builds up over time. One can't pinpoint a moment,
Right.
but as you said earlier, it comes from understanding. So only with the development of understanding can there be the confidence that there is only the way explained by the Buddha for the development of the path, and nothing else, no other endeavor or practice or route can lead to the same outcome.
Were you a
But
Buddhist before you met the John?
no, I
No.
had a curiosity about Buddhism.
Yeah.
I had a bit of contact. This would be in Indonesia with one or two people, and I had attended one retreat in Bali. But that was it. I had some typewritten notes of Nina's that had been passed to me by uh, Damadaro, whom I met in Java. But yeah, no, before that as I said, I had a curiosity, but had not read anything really relevant remotely. I'd read one or two books about people's experience with going to Burma, for example, but there's not much explanation of what the Dhamma is all about in such writings.
I suppose the other thing, it comes from previous accumulation, doesn't it?
Very
Because
much so. Yep.
yeah, it depends on the person because somebody may hear the same thing about Abhidharma or whatever and they have no interest whatsoever. So
Correct. Yeah.
it's not just understanding. What about you, Sarah? How did you become confident?
Well, I think, as you know, I'd been studying Buddhism for quite some time. I trained as a psychologist. I've been studying Buddhism. I've been talking to different teachers. I'd actually read quite a lot, but I, like everyone else, was following a meditation practice, living in a temple, and so on. But I had an idea there was something very wrong about it. And when I listened to Ajahn on an old tape talking about what is heard now, just sound, and so quickly there's the building up of the story, thinking about people, but actually it's just sound that's heard. The world right now is just sound. No one can control it. No one can do anything. No one can change anything. And it just immediately was true. It was right. It was understanding immediately that this was correct. And I listened a little bit more, and then overnight gave up the meditation practice completely, never any interest in it again. And then I started reading a lot, reading the Visuddhimagga, reading texts, and it all made much more sense. And when I looked at the texts before, and when I went back to England, I continued listening to the tapes a lot. I mean, over and over again. And by the time I met Ajahn about a year later in Sri Lanka, there were no questions about practice or meditation or anything. It was confidence already on what was true, what was right. And it wasn't, meeting her in person, because I'd just been listening to the recordings and reading and studying. And when I talked to you, actually, we had many discussions before I gave you the book and knew that you would appreciate it. So one thinks one just read something, but there has been the considering, the reflecting about life and about what is true. And so that when one reads what is correct, like in the first pages of Abhidharma in daily life, it makes sense. Yes, that's right. So I think the understanding has been developing, has been growing. So when one hears what is right, no doubt about it. And I never had any interest at all, ever, in listening to other teachers after that time. And I started sending books back to my previous teachers. But I just listened to tapes and met Ajahn and so on, but no doubt about what was true. And I never thought of it as her teachings. It's what the Buddha taught. We can find it in the text. So it was never just being with the person or any idol worship. It was, this is the truth.
Mm.
So I'm very appreciative.
And I think this bears out your comment about different accumulations, Alan, because it wasn't like that for me, that once I heard the Dhamma, then there was never any thought of doing a practice or anything like that. So I actually met Ajahn Suchin shortly after the encounter I mentioned in Java, and started attending the weekly discussions. But there was still the tendency to think of other things, ways of practice or whatever. Not that I ever pursued them, but the confidence didn't come until sometime later. I would say possibly years later. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you. Actually, I remember thinking, this is before we had our conversation, Sarah, about whether I should investigate Buddhism or not. And I went into the library and started reading a few books and just dismissed it as being a load of rubbish. But of course, the books I was reading were the Mahayana texts, I think, and I just dismissed it as gobbledygook. So I think the interesting thing is that I wasn't looking for anything, but it was so unexpected that it sort of fell in my lap, so to speak. And yeah, so it's life is just like that. It goes in ways you have no idea what's going to be next.
And it does depend on the interest and understanding, because like your original question about how does one convert to Buddhism? Well, Buddhist countries are full of people who are so-called Buddhists, but is there any understanding at all about the truths taught by the Buddha? And when I started discussing with you and with a few other friends in England, there was no background of Buddhism at all for any of us, but yet what we heard about the truth and what we read about made sense. So it doesn't depend on nationality or age or background. It just depends on the interest and understanding.
Yeah, I have direct experience of that because somebody I know who is Sri Lankan, they said that they gave me a book which wasn't Buddhist and saying, "Oh, this is better than what the Buddhism." And so that their natural religion was Buddhism. They're in a Buddhist country, and then they're sort of giving a book, a non-Buddhist book, and I thought it was a bit sort of sad, really. So yes, it
Yes,
doesn't depend on nationality or.
one of the articles that I'm editing that I mentioned earlier was from it was a talk that I gave at the Sri Lankan Buddhist temple in London in the late 1970s, and Venerable Sadatisa asked me to give a talk, and my talk was about what is a Buddhist, and this was the point I made, that being a Buddhist doesn't mean being a monk, it doesn't mean being a Sri Lankan or a Thai or a Cambodian. It's about understanding what the Buddha taught at this moment. That's all that matters. And I think that Liang is ready to join us. Hi, Liang. I just saw your comment. And also Pakani.
You've done it again, Liang.
So I think that understanding conditions more and more compassion, because there's less and less taking what is actually pity or aversion or clinging because it's my family member that's sick and so on, for being compassion, and compassion for anyone suffering, even, like Jonathan said, the perpetrators, because what about the terrible karma that will bring such awful results in future? So I think it's the understanding that conditions more and more true compassion, and that because there's more truthfulness, more honesty about it. And this is why the Buddha had the greatest compassion of all, because of that.
Yeah, and all kinds of kusala. And we know that kusala is beneficial not only to the person having it, but also to others. So that's where the confidence is needed in the value of panya, first of all, and value of all kinds of kusala.
I think it's time already, isn't it?
We better finish here because people are leaving already.